Once you're done watching this video, you're gonna know exactly how to install tile in your bathroom like a pro. In fact, probably better than most pros. No more filtering through low quality or incomplete information. You're gonna get everything you need right here to start your project today with confidence. Now, I cover a lot in this video, so here's what to expect. First, I'm gonna talk about the essential components that you'll find in any high quality shower installation. Then I'm going to talk about 2 different methods for waterproofing a shower and which one I recommend and why. And finally, I'm going to walk you step by step through the entire project while I install tile in this bathroom, from demo all the way to grouting the tile and finishing it up. So let's go ahead and get started. So first, let's talk about the basic construction of any high quality tile installation. So here you can see a cross section I've drawn of the wall with tile on it. Okay, this is if I cut the wall and then you're looking at it from the side. So you have the tile here, you have the studs, and you have the tub or the shower pan down here. So let's talk about the essential components of a high quality tile installation that's gonna look great, that's gonna last, and it's gonna be waterproof. Okay, so first you're gonna have the studs. Okay, and the studs are typically going to be spaced 16 inches on center. You're also going to have studs in the corner. And then screwed to the studs is going to be this wall board of some sort. And this is going to be some sort of sheeting like drywall, cement board, or maybe some specific board designed specifically for tile. So that you have that wall board, that's going to be attached to the studs with screws. And then on top of that, you're going to have this, see this blue? That represents a waterproof barrier. You must waterproof your shower if you want it to last and avoid mold issues in the future. Because here's the deal, okay? Tile itself is not waterproof. While it does shed most of the water that comes onto it, water is gonna find its way behind it. It might absorb through the grout, through the tile if the tile is porous, or even in the corners where the tiles meet, water is gonna find its way back there over time, and this is going to become damp, and over time mold is going to happen. It might even leak down to lower floors and cause issues there and expensive repairs. So you must waterproof a shower. Then on top of the waterproof barrier, you're going to attach the tile with the thin set, which is the black part of it here, which is basically concrete. Okay, it's a type of concrete. You're going to mix it up, apply it to the wall, and then you're going to stick the tile to that. And then in between the tile, you have your grout joints. And then between the tile and the tub, you are gonna leave a space of about 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch for some caulking, okay, for some silicone caulking. And that allows the tub to move around a little bit without chipping your tile. So with any high quality tile installation, one thing you're gonna really want is you're gonna want this wall, these studs, to be perfectly vertical or plumb and flat. Okay, so you don't have any bumps or waves in your tile and you don't have tiles kind of sticking out and stuff like that. You want the wall to be perfectly flat and plumb. If it's not plumb and it's either tilted in or out, then you're going to really notice that in the corners where the 2 walls meet, because you're going to have uneven tiles meeting, and it's going to be really noticeable. So you really want to make sure that that surface is perfectly plumb and flat, or at least as flat as you can get it. Another thing you're going to want to do with tile installation is use the right materials. Okay, some people might use the wrong material for thin set or something like that. And you really want to be careful about which materials you use, because some materials are going to break down with water, and you do not want that to happen in your shower. You don't want your tiles to start falling off the wall 2 months after you install the shower. That's going to be a huge bummer. And then the third thing you're really going to want to focus on with your tile installation is this waterproof membrane. You want to make sure that it is really sealed for water, so no water can get behind the walls and cause moisture issues. Which brings up a really good question, okay? What is the best way to waterproof a shower? Now, I could go into a whole bunch of pros and cons of all the different methods that are available and sit here for an hour talking about them, but instead I'm just going to tell you exactly which one I think is the best method to go with. And that is Schluter's Kerdi system, okay? Because the waterproofing is actually built into the board itself. So you screw the board to the wall and the board is waterproof right there. There's some extra stuff you got to do to it, but it's really easy to work with. So there's a lot of other reasons I like it. Number one, these wallboards are super light, they're really easy to cut, there's no dust, and they have really good resources online, training videos to show you exactly how to install it in all kinds of crazy situations, like if you're actually gonna build out your shower pan instead of have a tub or something like that. And they have a really good warranty. It's a great product, and they offer a lifetime warranty that covers labor and materials. Now, there is one major downside with using Kerdi-board by Schluter, which is that it's kind of expensive. For a typical shower that's, like, let's say you're doing a tub surround like in this shower, and it's about 3 feet by 5 feet wide, you're typically going to spend about $500 to $600 for the Schluter Kerdi system. So if you don't want to spend that much money, then you can go with another option, which is called RedGuard. Now, RedGuard is a method of waterproofing a shower where you actually paint it on. So you install a cement board here, and then you'd tape it off with some mesh tape, caulk a few edges, and then you'd actually apply some stuff that looks just like paint. You do 3 or 4 coats of that, let it dry, and then it's going to create a waterproof membrane that you can attach thin set and tile to. Now, this is a lot cheaper, but it has its own downsides as well. The first downside is that you're going to have to work with cement board, which is really heavy, it's dusty to cut, it's awkward to work with, it's just not very fun to work with. The second downside is that it puts off a lot of really intense odors. Okay, so if you have anybody in the family who has asthma or chemical sensitivity, or you just don't want to breathe in fumes, then RedGuard probably isn't going to be the best option. So again, I recommend the Kerdi-board by Schluter. I think it's a really great product. I think it's going to make the job much more enjoyable for you. It's going to be easier, it's going to save you time. You're going to be glad you did if you go with the Kerdi system. And by the way, I have no affiliation with Schluter. I just think it's a great product. Now, one thing you'll notice is that I don't have any vapor barriers. Okay, I don't have a vapor barrier behind the wallboard or anything like that. That's really not something that you should do unless it happens to be code in your area. So by the way, make sure to check the codes in your specific country, state, city, or whatever. But this is all you need, because these barriers, these waterproof barriers that I'm talking about, are waterproof and vapor-proof, and you're not going to get any benefit to installing that vapor barrier. So you don't need a vapor barrier. That is not a legitimate method for waterproofing a shower. Do not do it. Now that we have that covered, let's go ahead and jump right into the process step by step. The first step is to demo the old shower. Now, before you come swinging with a sledgehammer, I recommend locating all of the studs if you can, especially on the side walls, which will transition from tile to drywall. You don't need to turn off the water to the house for this step, as long as you avoid damaging the plumbing and you leave the shower valve closed. Do whatever you have to do to remove the old shower while avoiding damaging anything you want to keep in the new shower installation. And here's the important part. What I've done here is located the center of the stud that is closest to the bathtub without actually being located behind the bathtub. I want the center of the stud because I need it there to support the edge of the drywall and the edge of the Kerdi-board that I'll be installing later. This is where I'll transition from Kerdi-board to drywall, so you can see why I'd want to preserve the drywall here. Then, to avoid having to texture or repair the drywall, I'll actually run the tile beyond this transition and end the tile further out on the wall. This will not only save time, but it will look better too. To remove the bathtub, you'll need to remove the 2x4 stud on the side opposite of the drain so you can lift it out at an angle. For full details on how to remove and install a bathtub, check out my step-by-step video on that, which I've linked to in the video description. The demo is a quick step and will only take a couple of hours. The next step is to make sure the walls are flat and plumb, and if not, adjust as needed. To do this, grab a straight board or flat edge that is long enough to span each wall. Then place the flat edge against each wall horizontally to check for high or low spots on the wall. Here I am marking a plus sign wherever there is a gap between the board and the stud to let me know where I need to shim it later. If I find a high spot that is sticking out past the rest of the wall, I will put a minus sign indicating that I need to shave that spot down. Then get a long straight edge, ideally at least 6 feet long, and do the same thing vertically, marking high and low spots. You'll also want to take a level to the wall to make sure each wall is plumb or perfectly vertical. Once you've marked the walls, it's time to flatten them out. Here I'm using a planer to remove the high spots that I marked. Then I check for flatness again and keep going until I have as close to a perfectly flat wall as I can get. You could use a belt sander here, but a planer will be about 10 times as fast. Some areas require a hammer and a wood chisel. Removing high spots is actually the easy part. Shimming out low spots is a little more time consuming. If you find that a stud is sunk back into the wall, there are several ways to fix it. One way to do it is to sister another 2x4 against the 2x4 that is sitting back to bring it out a bit. Since I'm building a custom niche here, it was the perfect opportunity to do this. Another way is to simply add shims. The only caveat here is that you must place the shims exactly where the screws will be placed to mount the Kerdi-board. Otherwise, when you screw in the Kerdi-board, it will just bend and your wall won't be flat. You can figure out where the screws will go by measuring from the top of the tub and then marking every 12 inches from there. Take your time and get the walls as flat and as plumb as your patience will allow, because this will have a major impact on how professional your job looks when completed. Now it's time to move on to the plumbing. Since you have the walls removed, this is the perfect time to replace old, low-quality shower valves or to simply raise the height of the shower head so you don't have to duck down just to get your hair wet. If you're confident in your DIY plumbing abilities, then this is a project you can handle. If you're not, then hiring a plumber is a good idea. This is a time-consuming process that requires a lot of careful thought to make sure everything lines up, so give it the time and attention it deserves and don't rush. Once you've finished the plumbing for the shower valves, it's time to install the bathtub. The key here is to make sure the bathtub is level and supported well along the entire base. Otherwise, it could crack or move around on you while you're standing in it. Since this isn't something you can just fix later, you want to do it right the first time. For more details, watch my complete step-by-step video on how to replace a bathtub, which I've linked to in the video description. Once the plumbing is all done, it's time to install the wall sheeting, which will be a product called Kerdi-board. This will serve as both a waterproof barrier and a rigid backing for the tile to adhere to. If you plan to waterproof your shower using RedGuard, then you'll want to install cement board in place of the Kerdi-board. Schluter, which is the manufacturer of Kerdi-board, makes Kerdi-board in a variety of different thicknesses, anywhere from 3/16 of an inch up to 2 inches thick. For this project, I've chosen the 1/2 inch thick Kerdi-board because that matches the thickness of my drywall, which is important because I'll be seaming it up to my drywall. For most shower installs, you'll probably want to go with the 1/2 inch thick Kerdi-board for the same reason. Installing the Kerdi-board is actually pretty easy. You basically measure the walls, cut the Kerdi-board to size using a razor knife and a straight edge, and then screw the Kerdi-board to the walls using the special screws and washers designed to be used with this product. You'll want to install screws on each stud with the screws spaced 12 inches apart vertically. Tighten the screws enough so that the washer begins to compress the Kerdi-board just to the point where it is no longer sticking above the surface. I recommend starting at the bottom of the largest wall first and working upward. Then move on to the side walls. Install the Kerdi-board on all surfaces that you plan to tile, including any windows or custom niches. And even on the side of the tub, because that tends to see a lot of moisture and you want it to be waterproof to avoid rot and mold. Notice how the Kerdi-board butts up against the flange on the tub. If I tried to install the Kerdi-board so that it overlaps the flange, then the wall would bow out at the bottom and look like garbage. We'll come back and seal this up later. Now, on the back wall, you'll notice that I actually did overlap the flange with the Kerdi-board and use some Kerdi-fix to seal it. I did this because I thought it might be easier to simply shave off some of the Kerdi-board so that it would sit flush around the tub flange. You can see me cutting it right here. Did this actually save me time? Well, not really, but it did save me from having to use a massive amount of caulking later on, which will make sense after I explain the next step. When installing the Kerdi-board on the shower valve wall, you first want to cut the Kerdi-board to fit. Then go back and measure the location of the fixtures by measuring both from the top of the tub to the center of the fixture and the wall to the center of the fixture. Take your time here and measure carefully because the Kerdi-board is not cheap. Don't worry about making the holes perfect, we will go back and seal them up later. Okay, so here are a couple of tips when installing the Kerdi-board before I move on. Now, if you have a custom niche like this right here, or maybe a window in your shower or anything like that, there's a couple of things you're going to want to pay attention to. First, you're going to want to make sure all of these surfaces, the vertical surfaces, are perfectly plumb and the horizontal surfaces are perfectly level, as well as having the cutout perfectly square. Now, chances are, if you have a window or something, it's not going to be perfectly square. The sides of it and the top aren't going to be perfectly level. So in order to fix that, you can actually use some thin set underneath the Kerdi-board as you install it and use a level to make sure those boards are perfectly level and square. The second tip is that the ledge of the window or the niche needs to be angled slightly down and into the shower. So the back edge is actually going to be a little bit higher. And that's so when water gets back there, it just runs right out and down into the drain instead of pooling up. And my third tip is that Schluter actually makes pre-made custom niches out of the same material as their Kerdi-board. And these save a lot of time. Now, as you can see, I didn't do that in this shower, okay? And that cost me several hours of additional time trying to seal that for water with the Kerdi-band. I highly recommend that you go with a pre-made custom niche. It'll save you a lot of time, and they only cost like 60 or 70 bucks, I believe. Now that the Kerdi-board has been installed, it's time to make the shower waterproof so we can eliminate any chance of water getting behind the walls and causing rot, mold, and all that other nasty stuff that nobody wants. To do this, we're going to use several other Schluter products that are designed to work with this system. We'll use this Kerdi-band to seal the corners, the screws, and the joints where Kerdi-boards meet other surfaces. We're going to use some Kerdi-fix, which is a high-quality sealant. And we're going to use various Kerdi seals to seal around the plumbing fixtures to create a perfect, high-quality, waterproof barrier that will give you peace of mind for years to come. We'll start with the hardest part first, which is sealing around the tub where it meets the Kerdi-board. Start off by mixing some thin set to a thin consistency. I have a video on how to mix thin set that I've linked to in the video description. Then, cut a piece of Kerdi-band to size so that it spans from the corner to beyond the edge of the tub. Next, apply a liberal amount of Kerdi-fix to the tub flange. Then, apply some thin set to the Kerdi-board using a 1/8 inch V-notch trowel as recommended by Schluter, which you can also purchase directly from Schluter. Place the Kerdi-band over the seam and then use a putty knife to flatten the Kerdi-band and remove excess thin set and sealant. Your goal here is to create a flat, waterproof surface for the tile to be installed on all the way around the tub. Next, install the Kerdi-band in the corners and where the Kerdi-board meets the drywall. To apply the Kerdi-band, you'll need a 1/8 inch V-notch trowel to apply the thin set, which you can buy directly from Schluter. And you'll want to use a putty knife to squeeze out excess thin set from behind the Kerdi-band to keep it as flat as possible. Just don't overwork it or the Kerdi-band will start to come off. Then install the Kerdi-band on all of the corners and edges of the windows and custom niches. Schluter makes pieces for the corners as well, which need to be purchased separately. This is a time-consuming process, especially if you have a lot of windows or custom niches. This is actually the main reason I recommend buying a pre-made niche instead of building one custom like I did. Sealing up all of the corners took forever. Schluter also makes seals for around the shower fixtures. You'll need 3 different seals for your shower. One for the tub spout, one for the valve, and one for the shower spout, which will be a different size than the tub spout. To apply these, use the same process you used for the Kerdi-band. Apply thin set with a 1/8 inch V-notch trowel, and then go back over it and remove excess thinset while pressing the seal against the Kerdi-board. And finally, install the Kerdi band over all of the screws you used to secure the Kerdi-board. Basically, anywhere there is a gap, seam, or hole, you'll cover it with Kerdi band. You don't need to worry about where the walls meet the ceilings unless you are installing a steam shower. If you are installing a steam shower, then you'll need to waterproof the ceiling as well. Then, if you have a window, you'll want to apply some Kerdi fix where the Kerdi-board meets the window on both the sides of the window and the window sill. When you're done, it will look something like this. Make sure to remove any high spots if there are any. You want the surface to be as flat as possible and ready for tile. Giving the entire surface a wipe down with a damp sponge is a great way to remove any bumps or chunks of thinset that are left over. Okay, now it's time to start installing the tile. Well, kind of. First, we actually need to plan the tile layout. You see, if we just start installing tile right away and just start in like a corner or the bottom corner or something like that and just tile from there, the tile project is going to look really bad, like an amateur did it. Now, you probably are an amateur, but that doesn't mean you need your installation to demonstrate that fact. So again, the next step is to plan the tile layout and where we're going to place these tiles to make it look like a professional did it. To create your tile layout, the first thing to do is to draw up a diagram that has all of the measurements as you see I've done here. Measure from the tub to every feature, and then measure each feature and their distances from the walls and mark those dimensions on your diagram. Then measure the exact dimensions of your tile. If you're using a small tile like I am, then you'll get a more accurate measurement by measuring 10 or so of them and then dividing your measurement by 10. If you're using spacers for your grout joint, you will obviously want to include those as well because they will determine the stack height of your tiles, which is ultimately what you're trying to figure out here. The tiles I'm using have spacers built into the tile, which is why you don't see me using spacers here. Now that you have all of the measurements you need, do some calculating and planning so that you can place your tiles in a way that will avoid having small slivers of tile anywhere in the installation. Now, the first thing that you want to figure out is where to start the first row of tiles so you know where to install your ledger board, which is going to be used to support that first row. Now, as you see here, I didn't start the first row of tile directly on top of the tub. And there's actually two reasons that I did that. Number one, tubs are never perfectly level on the top here. They're never perfectly flat or level. They bow in so the water can drain and it just doesn't pour over the sides. The second reason is that if I just started with a full tile right here on top of the tub, then I might end up with a very awkward situation further up the wall, like on the custom niche, for example, where I might have a really thin tile or where a grout joint lines up where it's really close to the edge of a window, the niche, or maybe even the ceiling. And you really want to plan your tile layout so that you don't have any tile thicknesses that are less than a third of the total height of your tile, because it just looks bad. If there's really thin pieces of tile anywhere, it just looks like an amateur did it. So you really want to figure out the best place to start this first row, and this is actually the first row, so you don't end up with any of those weird situations. Now, the larger tiles you have, the easier this process is because you have fewer grout joints. With small tiles like subway tile, you're gonna have to be extra careful because you really want to avoid those small slivers of tile or any awkward situations in the corners. Once you've figured out a good height of the ledger board, which will be used to support your first row of tiles, use a level to draw a line all the way around the shower walls where the top of the ledger board will be. Then, draw a vertical line in the center of the back wall, again using a level to make sure it is vertical. You'll also want to draw vertical lines where the tile will end on the side walls. These lines are important because they will guide you while installing the tile later and give you a starting point for placing your tiles. Once you've drawn your lines, grab two tiles and use them to quickly check if everything will line up as you expected. If you are using spacers between the tiles, then you'll need to use those as well, of course. Here, I'm adding an extra piece of Kerdi-board to bring the top edge of the niche down so I can avoid having a sliver of tile above the custom niche. There was no way around this, so this was the best solution. Again, take your time planning the layout of your tile. It's going to take some time and it's going to take some mental effort, but it's going to have a really big impact on the quality of your tile installation and whether or not somebody thinks it looks great or it looks like it was done by an amateur. Once you've planned your layout and marked the walls, it's time to install the ledger board. So find a straight board and cut it to the size you need to install it around the tub on the walls. Then secure it to the walls with screws at the locations of the studs. Be careful to avoid the tub flange with the screws. Don't worry about the holes you just created. We'll go back and seal those up with Kerdi-fix later. The key here is to ensure your ledger board is perfectly level all the way around the tub, because this is going to be what supports the tile and creates the foundation that all the other tiles are placed on. Now you're finally ready to start laying some tile. To lay the tile, you'll need to mix up a batch of thinset, which is pretty straightforward. You just follow the directions on the back of the bag. For more details on how to mix thinset, see my other video that I've linked to in the description. Once you've mixed the thinset, apply it to the walls using a trowel. You want to use the correct size trowel for the tile you are using. The bigger the tile, the bigger the notch you want on your trowel. For this subway tile, I'm using a 1/4 inch square notch trowel, which means there are 1/4 inch squares cut out of it. You'll need a trowel with a larger notch in it if you are using larger tiles. Since you only have a limited time before the thinset begins to harden, you want to spread a small section at a time. Here I'm doing 6 rows at a time. This will give me plenty of time to spread the thinset, place the tiles, and cut the tiles that I need to cut while the thinset is still tacky. When spreading the thinset, be sure to leave the guidelines uncovered so you know where to place the tiles. Now if you have a laser, then you can use that instead and you don't have to worry about leaving the guidelines uncovered. Now once you have the thinset spread on the walls, go back and run the trowel vertically so that your trowel lines are parallel to each other and go up the wall. You want these to be as consistent as possible with no bare spots to ensure proper adhesion of the tile. Notice how I have 2 lines that I'm leaving exposed. That's because I'll be staggering the rows of tiles, so I need 2 lines to guide me. And I separate them like this so I have room to apply thinset in between them. Once you've applied thinset to a section, start in the center and place each tile carefully, pressing each tile into the wall and wiggling it back and forth to ensure a consistent bond with the wall. Work your way out toward the corners where you want to leave a small gap of about 1/8 of an inch between the tile and the corner. To cut the tiles, you can use several tools. A manual tile cutter is a great tool to have in the bathroom with you to make quick straight cuts. A wet table saw is great to make very clean, consistent cuts, or for cutting a lot of tiles to the same exact size. Continue placing the tiles until you complete the section. This is a messy process, so you'll want to have a bucket and a sponge handy to clean up the thinset as you go. Whatever you do, do not let the thinset dry on the surface of the tile or in the grout joints because it can ruin your install. Once you've completed a section, go back and make adjustments while the thinset is still wet to ensure the row of tiles at the top is still level. I used these small wedge spacers to make adjustments here, but you may use something different based on the tile you are using. And again, these subway tiles have spacers built in. Most tiles do not, and you will need to use tile spacers to create your grout joints. Talk to your local tile shop to get the right tile spacers for your specific project. Before moving up further on the wall, install the tile on the side walls as well. This is important because it will allow you to make small adjustments as you go to keep the grout joints lined up on all 3 walls. As you can see here, I'm using an extruded aluminum piece at the edge of the tile to create a modern look. I actually did this for 2 reasons. Number 1, I think it looks better. Number 2, it's cheaper than buying tiles that have the bull-nosed finished edge on them for the edge pieces. But it is optional, and you just use some thinset to apply them. Continue working your way up the walls section by section. As you run into different features in your installation, you'll need to make more intricate cuts. A hole saw with a diamond blade can be used to cut holes, and an angle grinder with a diamond blade is helpful to make intricate or curved cuts. Be extra careful when working around windows or custom niches. These features can be very time consuming because they require a lot of detailed cuts. Notice the ledger board above the window and the niche, which is there to keep the tile from sliding down the wall while the thin set hardens. This is basically just a straight piece of wood, which is held up by another piece of wood, which is wedged in order to keep it in place. As you can see, I'm using a slightly different extruded aluminum for the edges of the custom niche and window. These are also made by Schluter, and they require some precision when cutting them to length. They also have these little corner pieces that give them a nice transition in the corners. But again, they're somewhat difficult to work with and they do require some precision. Work your way all the way up the walls until you reach your stopping point. And make sure that each tile has solid contact with thinset. Aim for 100% of the tile touching thinset. In some situations, you may need to add additional thinset to the back of the tile, which is called back buttering. Once the thinset has hardened on the first section of tile, you can remove the ledger board. Use some Kerdi-fix to seal up the holes that were created when attaching the ledger board. Now it's time to tile around the tub and down the sides of the tub. This is a time-consuming process because you are cutting almost every piece of tile and most likely applying the thinset to the tiles individually instead of the wall. This is called back buttering the tiles. When tiling on the side of the tub, I find it easier to work from the top and go down using tape to hold the tiles together until I reach the bottom and can support the tile with spacers. Then I remove the tape. When tiling around the tub, you want to leave a 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch gap between the tile and the tub for caulking. This will be filled with silicone later. And by the way, you also want to leave about a 1/8 of an inch gap between the tiles in the corners of the walls. Installing the tile will probably take longer than you expect, but if you take your time and you don't rush things, you will end up with a tile installation that is better than most pros. Once you're completely done installing the tile, wait 24 hours for the thinset to cure completely, and then you're ready to start applying grout to the tile. And at this point, you're almost done. There's just a few more steps to go. Congratulations on the progress. To get started with the grout, mix a small batch of whatever grout you have chosen for your tile project, following the directions that came with the grout. To apply the grout, you'll need a float, a bucket with clean water, and a brand new sponge. Wipe the grout on the walls with the float and push the grout into the joints to fill them up completely. Then go back and wipe off the excess grout with the float and come back with a damp sponge to clean up the grout joints. Do this in sections just like you did for the tile so that the grout doesn't harden on you before you have a chance to clean it off with a sponge. Try to avoid getting grout in the corners and between the tile and the tub. These joints will need to be caulked later. Also, I've created an in-depth video on grouting a tile shower that I've linked to in the video description. Be sure to watch that video to help you choose the right grout and to mix and apply it properly. Once you've finished grouting, it's time to caulk the shower. You'll need 3 different types of caulking. One that is the same color as the grout, which will be made by the same company that made the grout you are using. The second one will be a white silicone that matches the tub for caulking around the tub. And the third is a clear silicone for caulking around the shower fixtures. Caulk all of the inside corners of the tile with the colored caulking. You can also use the colored caulking between the ceiling and the tile, since that doesn't need to be waterproof up there. Then, caulk around the tub with white silicone. I like to use tape here to help create a cleaner caulking line. Take your time with this because it will make a big difference in how good your install looks. And finally, the very last step is to seal the grout with a penetrating grout sealer. You're going to want to wait 48 hours at least for the grout to cure before doing this. But this is an easy step that will help your grout last much longer and help it avoid stains. So pick up a penetrating sealer such as Sealer's Choice Gold and either spray it on the walls or use a sponge brush to apply it. I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's given you a really solid grasp on how to install tile in your shower. And remember, I have more videos about how to tile a shower that go into more depth into each individual step of how to install tile in a shower. I highly recommend you check those out. Be sure to hit that like button and give me some love. I definitely put a lot of effort into this video and I would really appreciate it. Also, make sure to subscribe. My videos are only gonna get better. And finally, if you're a skilled DIYer and you wanna learn how to turn those skills into a profitable business that you can generate a six-figure income and replace your day job, then visit me over at handymanstartup.com, where you can learn about all of my business training resources on how to start a professional handyman business. I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching. I'm Dan Perry, and I'll see you in the next video.